Pradyut, I think you need to. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome on behalf of the Asian Confluence. I'm Sabyasachi Datta, uh, welcoming you to this webinar titled Unique, Climate Resilient, and Livable Mountain Cities in East and South Asia. We are organizing this webinar in collaboration with our partners, UNICITI. Um, this topic of urbanization in East and South Asia, which comprises the mountainous regions on the foothills of the Himalayas, spanning all the way till the rim of the Bay of Bengal, is a geography which is very interesting. Um, Marked by increasing importance in the world of geopolitics, and increased connectivity and trade related investments are happening in Eastern South Asia, in Bhutan, in Nepal, in the BBIN region, in the northeast of India, in the areas in Bangladesh. And with all of this, there is a rapid increase in unplanned urbanization. There's a migration to cities, and which brings in a host of issues. There is a new need for new thinking in urban infrastructure planning, urban water resources. How do we generate spaces for new industries, soft service industries, giving city dwellers spaces to engage? How do we ensure gender parity? How do we ensure safety? Ideate and development on sustainable tourism. How do we allow our institutions to flourish? We increase the role of technology, and cities are the hub and the soul of development. So, this webinar we bring focus on the impact of climate change on the development of mountain cities and discuss their avenues for adapting to climate change. We would like to identify key urbanization challenges in these mountain cities, learn from best practices, learn from each other, identifying policies, financial mechanisms, social dynamics which can best create and mitigate the impact of climate change on mountain cities. So it is an opportunity for peer learning and cooperation. And I'm so pleased to have here today a very, very distinguished panel, and preceded by a keynote special address by Dr. Sudesh Ratna, who is the Deputy Head and Senior Economic Affairs Officer in the UN ESCAP Sub-Regional Office for South and Southeast Asia. Welcome, Dr. Rajan Ratna. We're really pleased to have you here. After the opening special address by Dr. Rajan Ratna, we will have a panel discussion which will be moderated by Ms. Olga Chepliansky, who is the founder of UNICITI, and she will be joined in a panel by Mr. Pema Thinle, Senior Urban Planner and Researcher, Center for Bhutan Studies, Mr. Joydeep Gupta, Editor at Large, Third Pole India, Mr. Sanjeev Buchar, Intervention Manager, Isimod Nepal, Mr. Ivan Mokro, who is a Senior Architect in the city of Shillong, and Mr. Vivek Linda, who is a Senior Project Manager at Meghalaya Climate Change Center. So, this is a very unique combination of experts who would be giving us a perspective on the challenges on the development of mountain cities. May I also say that this is a prelude to Asian Confluence and Unicity collaboration seminar at the upcoming Asia Pacific urban forum, which is to be held in South Korea next week. So, a special welcome to the audience. We would like to make this as interactive as possible. So, after the initial panel discussion, we would really like your inputs, the audience's inputs. Please feel free to use the chat box at any time to give your inputs, your ideas, and the whole idea is to build a community of experts and a knowledge base. And Asian Confluence, in collaboration with Unicity, would like to take this agenda forward, and we can see this as a start of a process. On that note, again, a special welcome to all our panelists, speakers, and audience, those joining us live, and those who will also view this video later on after this broadcast is over. So, special welcome. And now, may I request Dr. Rajan Sudesh Ratna to deliver a special address. But before he does that, a little bit more about him. He's leading research, policy advisory, and capacity building, especially for women led MSMEs, for using digital marketing and e commerce platforms for promoting their businesses and becoming part of regional and global value chains. He's worked earlier in trade, investment, innovation divisions in Bangkok. He's worked as a professor and head at the Center for WTO Studies, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade, and he is an Indian civil servant and has worked for 25 years in the government of India, mostly in the Ministry of Commerce, handling trade policy issues and trade negotiations in WTO and FTAs. So, who else better to give us, coming from government and in his role at SCAP, to give us an opening sort of a perspective on the development of this very important subject? Dr. Ratna, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Datta, for this introduction and having invited me for this webinar, which is very, very relevant. And it is very important because this is an area also we are working, especially in UNSCAP, in the BBIN region. And to tell you the truth, this is also a very timely, because when you are discussing these issues, some of them get subsumed into the SDG 13, which is on a climate change, and that is the theme of 2024 high level policy dialogue in the UN General Assembly, and also about the Asia Pacific Forum for Sustainable Development, which will take place in February 2024. Now, coming to setting on the tone, what I would like to touch upon, and I'm sure in the panel discussion deliberations would be made, but in the hilly areas, there are certain challenges which are being faced, and that needs to be kept in mind while devising any urbanization or any planning or any infrastructure building. And that comes to the vulnerability, which is not only in terms of the climate change, but climate induced natural disasters. And we know extreme weather conditions which have been prevailing. In the background note, you talked about Meghalaya, a state which gets the highest rainfall in India. And therefore, it building some kind of a resilience from the natural disaster, at the same time having climatic conditions and heavy rainfalls and temperature fluctuations is very, very important. That is perhaps one of the historical reasons as to why many of the industrialization in either the northeast region of India or hilly areas of Bhutan, Nepal, and Bangladesh have not been developed. The second, which I would like to touch upon, is the accessibility to the infrastructure. Connectivity is very, very important, whether it is IT, it is road, rail, transport, waterways, or you go for the multimodal electricity. These are very important for the present setup if you want an economic development. Now, the another challenge which most of the countries, most of the cities of urbanization are facing is the shift of the migration from the rural areas to these new upcoming cities, which is creating an imbalance on the sustainability. The buildings are not there, water management, sanitation, having a sustainable water supply would be another challenge. And when it comes to northeast or hilly areas of Bhutan, Nepal, all these places are very, very agile, and people are very, very aware. And biodiversity conservation is another important. So when we are talking about building any infrastructure, building cities, or bringing people and industries, one thing which would need to keep in mind is about the biodiversity of the mountain areas as to how they can be maintained, and therefore urban planning should minimize the habitat disruptions and encourage green spaces. And also two things which are very unique, and I have seen personally in Northeast and also in Bhutan and in certain communities in certain places in Nepal, is about the cultural heritage preservation and community engagement. The local communities are very, very strong at certain places, and they are part of local level decision making and planning, and therefore when any urbanization or mainstreaming happens, that need to be kept into place, and they are also very much sensitive to their protection of their cultural heritage preservation. So, having said that, I am sure many of these facets, their challenges, the best practices, good practices is going to be discussed. And I wish you all a very successful deliberation. And congratulations to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ratna. This is you raised some very, very important issues, such as I think the local culture and the heritage of the place and biodiversity conservation. Because coming from a place like Shillong, where we are headquartered, such as Asian Confluence, we see that the biodiversity in such upcomings in cities are really being at a big challenge, and we see that across the region, actually in the eastern Himalayan region. So thank you very much for that, and I hope during the course of this webinar and at the end you'll have some time to spend with us. I hope you can stay as long as you can, so I know you have a schedule, but if you can, do stay back with us. uh,
I have a parallel session running on and
that's okay.
discussion on SDG 13 only, but
That's
I will
okay.
be off and on. I will be joined,
That's
but
okay.
I will
Thank you
not
so
be
much. Thank you very much.
immediately.
And we will be in touch. Thank you so much. Now, may I invite Miss Olga Chaplyansky to, who is the founder and the mover in Unicity, to take over the proceedings. And Olga, over to you to take this forward. And maybe I'll come back at the very end again to say thank you to everybody.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Sabia. Thank you very much, Dr. Ratna, for this introduction and setting the scene on this very important topic. It's absolutely a delight for UNICITI to be associating with Asian Conference on this. It's a very exciting topic. And just to give a quick insight on the background of how we reached there, during the G20 presidency held by India, there were a number of events, one of which I had attended in Shillong. And that gave me the occasion to get exposed to challenges that mountain cities in the region are facing. And Dr. Sabia has been very instrumental in guiding me through. We had a couple of visits of the city. We interacted with a number of other experts. And we saw that this was maybe a gap that was not sufficiently filled as yet in terms of focus and expertise and really understanding what are the specific challenges of mountain cities versus other cities. For example, for me, working on climate change extensively, I see that high attention is dedicated to coastal cities, which of course is very relevant due to sea level rise, and often these cities are exposed to heavy floods as well. Now, when it comes to mountain cities, maybe because they're less in numbers, maybe for other reasons, attention is a bit less, and we felt that this gap could be tackled, and we could see what we can do about this. So this is how we associated, and we thought that bringing all of you here, of course, our distinguished panelists, but also everyone who has joined here and who has an interest in this topic, that would be a great start for us to really understand better from your expertise and exposure on where we stand today, what solutions have been tried, which ones have been successful, which ones maybe have been less successful. So this is where we stand as of now. Quick introduction of myself. Sabi already said a couple of words. I had UNICITI, which is an international think tank and consultancy focusing on actually reactivating unique identity of cities in Asia and more generally in the global south. We do that with a number of instruments, including climate change, which is one of the main instruments here. And now, in view of the COP28, which is upcoming, we thought that it would be great to focus this webinar a little more on the climate topic and understand better how climate change is affecting in specific ways the mountain cities. With that, may I request Pradyu to help us with having all our panelists on the screen, please? And Sabia has greatly helped us already with introducing everyone, but I would like us to get to know each other a little better and take just a few minutes for that. So I would suggest two things. First, for the participants who have joined us, could you please take a minute and in the comments section, let us know what is your name, where you're based, and what brought you here. This will start, getting us to understand a little better what are your interests, how we can better respond to them, and how we can possibly together build a community that will help mountain cities develop in a more organic, local context-oriented manner. So please just take a minute and tap in the chat your name, where you're based, and why you're here. And then meanwhile, may I request every panelist, please, to just take 1 minute to tell us 3 things about you. So your name and where you're based, that's the same with participants. The second point is, please give us a quick overview of your expertise when pertaining to mountain cities. What are your main focus? And third thing, to make it a little more fun, can you please tell us one fact related to your professional background, preferably to mountain cities, but it can be anything, which few professionals know about you? So I will start maybe with Joydeep, and then Joydeep, please designate the next speaker who can do the same.
Okay, thanks, Olga. Hi, everybody. I'm Joydeep Gupta. I'm a journalist. I'm the editor at large at the Third Pole, which is an environment news website, and I'm based in Bangkok. And if you want, what very few people probably know is that one of the things I absolutely love about going to the mountain areas and including mountain cities of the Eastern Himalayas is that they're full of orchids. And I love orchids. And that's where I get my orchid collection from. I think I'm going to now pass it on to, who should I pass it on to, Olga? Okay. Let me see. Who should pass it on to? I'll pass it on to Mr. Vivek Lingdo.
Okay, good afternoon, Dr. Sabia, Ms. Olga, and the rest of the panel. My name is Vivek Lindo, and I have been working in the Meghalaya Climate Change Center for the past 8 years. And my expertise have been in the field of understanding vulnerabilities of the systems which are exposed to climate change, the impacts of climate change. And over the years, we've been also, from the center, we've been engaged in revising the State Action Plan on Climate Change. And that's where we have been also interacted with a lot of stakeholders, including departments and other institutes, in trying to define and bring shape to the document to make it more relevant to the impacts that we are facing currently. We are also having a lot of people with research institutes where we do a lot of studying about the vulnerabilities at higher resolutions, which I will be speaking towards as the program goes. So I think that's a little bit about me, and then we can continue understanding more from my work that I've been doing as a center. So thank you, and I will pass to. I think I have a fellow Shillongite, so I think Ivan he can be the next.
Vivek, just a quick request. If you could please maybe try to see that light comes to your face because we don't see you clearly since you're speaking first while we continue this. Thanks a lot. We do not have the sound. We may need you
Sorry.
to unmute yourself,
Yeah,
please.
sorry.
Great.
So my name is Ivan. I'm an architect by profession based in Shillong. I've been working since 1990, and my interest is obviously my own city of Shillong, especially the urban context, the things that have gone wrong and have gone good in Shillong. And as Olga was mentioning, I am also an avid trekker. I trek a lot along the hills of the Khasi and Jaintia hills. So very familiar with the geography of the place and also the people living in the rural areas. Apart from that, the other interest is, of course, rural tourism, which is very dear to me. And that's all for now. Thanks.
Um, Ivan,
Uh,
who would
so
you?
uh, I can't see any more of the panelists. Maybe my friend from Bhutan, who's an urban planner, could maybe introduce himself. Yeah.
Emma, please unmute yourself.
Sorry. So, hello everyone. I'm Pemachle. So, I'm professionally an urban planner, but currently, I'm working as a researcher here at Center for Bhutan and Jain Studies, which is based at capital of Bhutan, which is Thimphu. So, uh, the climate change thing, the climate change impact, the problems of climate change, and all these things came to me when I was working as an urban planner. I faced lots of challenges because of this when I was implementing urban plans. And I was back then working as an urban planner in the eastern part of Bhutan, which is specifically the Bumthang district. So I was working as an urban planner, implementing plans, planning urban plans, and at that during that time I faced lots of challenges because of this climate change impact and all, because specifically talking about climate change here in Bhutan, in Bumtang, what I faced is because of the glacier lake outburst floods and all. So yeah, I think this platform is very relevant, and I'm very excited to learn and from the senior. I mean, lots of seniors here, and I've just started my journey as an planner and researcher. I'm still learning, so yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you.
Wonderful. And I think Mr. Sanjeev is left. Sanjeev, make sure to tell us a fact few people know about you. We're very curious.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on the time zone. I'm Sanjeev Butcher, and I'm working at the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development as Senior Watershed Management Specialist, but also as an intervention manager for the intervention on sustainable springs, which is a part of our action area on regenerating and restoring landscapes in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. Well, I studied botany and ecology. I did my master's and PhD on an interesting crop. It's called as Thyssanolina maxima or broom grass, and I did ecophysiological studies of that grass, ranging from various studies of tissue culture to land use change, how it impacts on the species, the beneficial use, etc., etc. But that was my academic experience. In reality, I always worked in watershed management programs. So I have all nearly 25 years of experience of watershed management in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. And since the last 5 to 6 years, I'm now working on spring shed management, which is slightly different from the conventional watershed management approaches to reviving springs. And I think I'll be sharing a few of that learning during our panel. I've also worked in Afghanistan for nearly 6 years with Helveta Swiss Intercorporation. I think that experience I have learned a lot as to how to work in conflict, sensitive ways in areas such as Afghanistan or other contexts. And I am part of the global network on WOCAT, which is the World Overview of Conservation Approaches and Technologies, for documenting and evaluating good practices in sustainable land and water management. So some of my hobbies are I like to sing. I'm a very bad singer, though, but yeah, and I like cooking and all. So that's me. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So the panel will be ending with a song. Get ready. Thank
I'll
you
try.
so much. Thank you so much, everyone. It's been great to get to know you a little bit from that different angle from what we could read from your bio, hear it from yourself. And thank you so much to all the participants who are also sharing, as I see, insights about themselves. So when we start a more interactive part, that will also be great to know who's in the room. So let us now delve into the technical part of the panel. So what we are going to do right now is that each speaker is going to take 10 minutes and delve on a topic, which the structure of the panel will be such that we'll start with climate change adaptation and mitigation challenges that mountain cities of East and South Asia are facing. And after that, we'll delve more into the specifics, what are common urban challenges that mountain cities are facing, what are responses, be it in terms of architecture, urban design, in terms of governance, in terms of structure, in terms of bylaws, in terms of water management, that are being brought up by these cities, and then what is it that we can learn from them. So to start with that, I would like to call on the floor Mr. Vivek Lindo. And Vivek, as I understand, you will walk us through an overview of what are present and future climate change trends in northeastern India, and how do these trends affect frequency and intensity of natural disasters, which in turn affect mountain cities. Please take over.
All right, thank you, Ms. Olga. I will share my screen. Okay, I think Pradyut this. Okay, are you able to see the presentation?
Yeah.
Yes, we can see the slides.
Once again, I would like to thank both Solga and Dr. Sabia, UNICITI and Asian Confluence for providing this opportunity. And it is a very important subject that we understand the importance of how to make cities climate resilient, and especially in mountain cities which are impacted, and especially the Himalayan region. So, if Pradyut, if the first slide, please. Just to understand the Indian Himalayan region, there are about 12 states which are mapped, which are directly falling under the Himalayan ecosystem. And these, as we know, are very fragile and have a very diverse ecosystem and population. So we have about 51 million people which are engaged in agriculture, which is an important sector, and which feeds to the other population. So it's a densely populated region, and then this Himalayan ecosystem is a very important ecosystem because it provides forest, water, and biodiversity and energy. So it is a very important region for us, and we need to also understand why climate change and how climate change is impacting. So I think to understand the vulnerabilities, there have been studies which have been conducted. The state of Meghalaya has been part of a group of the other states in the Himalayan region to come up with a study, and this has been designed and developed and the study was developed by IIT Guwahati, IIC Bangalore, and in the next slide you will see what this vulnerability shows. And if you can see what this study was done in 2018 and 19, where different parameters were taken as indicators, and these indicators were compared among all the states. And this was also done at a district level. I think the details can be found in the, the websites of DST, which is the parent department for all the climate change centers across India. So for the Himalayan states, we've done the study which tells us that though these indicators, if we look carefully at these indicators, they're more into the rural setup. But nonetheless, these studies are important to understand the systems that are vulnerable to climate change. So we know that climate change is impacting us, but how are the systems? How are they uh, positioned to the impacts of climate change. So this gives us an understanding of what are the parameters, what we choose the parameters are the ones that we are going to decide how do we address these issues. Okay, so the later part comes how do we build policies or how do we come up with a plan to address these issues. So in the next slide, Pradeep, please. Yes. So coming back to Meghalaya, where we have seen a huge range of climatic impacts. So we're calling about the variabilities and the extreme events that has been happening across the state. So especially in the city and across the states, basically. So we've seen floods, we've seen some severe squalls and urban floods, and so these are some of the highlights that I've tried to capture over the years that we've experienced in the state. Um, Next, please. Yes. So again, to try and understand if we have been experiencing climate change in Meghalaya, so there's a study that was done with the help of IIT Gandhinagar, where we've tried to understand the past data. So this data is from 1982 to 2012, where we've seen in the past 30 years there has been an increase in both temperature and rainfall. So as you can see, we have had an increase of about 1 degree Celsius over the last 3 decades, which is a clear sign, a scientific sign, data that backs that yes, the state of Meghalaya has been experiencing an increase in temperature. And if we do not address these issues, we will probably see a much higher increase in temperature in the coming years, which again this study tries to tell us if the adaptation and the mitigation actions are not in place, and how bad are these temperature increase are going to be in the future. So again, with rainfall, we've had an increase of almost 12 millimeters per year uh, in the whole state. So you can also see that there's a variability in the region where some part of the state may have experiences lower increase in temperature and rainfall than the other regions of the state. But this gives us an idea of where we can plan if extreme events are going to happen, if we know that these areas are likely they have been experiencing, so we can have an understanding of what the future is going to show us. So in the next slide, Pradeep, please. Yes, so the projections with temperature, if you look at the projections, what are they telling? So the projections have been done over the 4 different RCPs, which is the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and over 3 timelines. So we have a near term, and a mid term, and a long term. So you can see that the potential projected rise in temperatures over these different time periods and over the different RCPs. Um, so this will give us an idea of how do we address these issues, and how do we target these areas which are going to face a higher increase in temperature rise. So similarly, in the next slide, next please, you will also see that which are the areas that are going to face higher rainfall, and which are the regions which are going to receive uh, rainfall. So you can see the central part of Meghalaya is where most of the rainfall is likely going to happen in the future, based on those data which has based on the past observed data. So again, these are some things that we need will will tell us where we are going to have our actions, and where we are going to direct the document, the policy documents, and the adaptive actions and mitigation actions. So this gives us an idea. So this is talking about the climate aspect. So now we also have done studies to show what are the systems, what are the vulnerability of the system. So the next slide, please. Yes, so we've done an integrated vulnerability where we have downscaled this data into a block level. So this is because we have to have data to conduct these studies. So we have been able to get data at the block level, and we have been able to conduct this assessment. So the vulnerability assessment of the block. So again, you can see there are some districts which are highly vulnerable, and there are some which are quite in comparison to the others. Like you can see four district blocks which are very low in the vulnerability, but this is mostly because of the infrastructure that and the indicators that we've picked. So similarly, in the next slide, please. So these are the indicators that are going to drive the vulnerability of these blocks. So we know, if you can see, 10% is the lack of Anganwadi centers, and then we have Kisan credit cards. So these are most rural based, the assessment. And but then again, they give us an idea of where we are going to target in the coming days to enhance the resilience of these blocks. So next slide, please. So going forward from the vulnerability assessment, what we have now done is we have done a risk assessment, which also involves the vulnerability, and we're also taking exposure, and we're taking the hazards. So when we're talking about hazards, we're talking about what are the kind of hazards that the state is likely to face. So landslide, floods, droughts. But for this assessment, we have taken drought and we have taken floods. Why? Because these are the two which uh, directly determined by the amount of precipitation. So we've taken the standard precipitation index as the base data for doing the assessment for the hazards. And for the exposure assessment, we do.
Yes, I have a sign telling me 10 minutes are gone, but please take a minute or two if
All right, all right, all right. Okay, so again, yes. So this will again give us a complete picture of both the vulnerability and what the exposure, and again the hazard. So what is the percentage which is adding up to the risk? So in the next slide, please, Pradyut. Yes, so these are the different district. This has been done at this district level. So we can see here again which districts are, they have a proneness to wetness and a prone to dryness, and then which which districts are exposed and to the impacts of climate change, and which one are again vulnerable to climate change based on these again the indicators. In the next slide, please. I'll just wrap it up. So again, so what we do is after getting these studies, what we do is we are redrafting the state action plan climate change, and we identify these problems. And if you can see that we have identified some of the priority sectors for the state, and one of them is the sustainable habitat. And the key concerns which have been identified are urban water supply, inadequate waste management, the lack of stormwater drainage, and uncontrolled urban development, and then transport management. So these are some of the key concerns that the sector has seen. And these, again, the departments, this is again in consultation with the departments where they have addressed these and shown these as the key concern, and what can be done to address them is what the action plan will tells us. So based on this, what we have decided, I mean, in our earlier conversation with Miss Olga, next slide, please, which is yes. So this is what we were thinking, and in an earlier discussion that we've had, that the center has a capacity to conduct similar studies at a very granular level. And so, so these studies that we have been is a macro approach. So what we need is a downscaling to understand even at a very granular scale. So downscaling is required, and then whatever assessments that can be done can be uh, can be drafted into an action document, a policy document, and which can be used to for the state government to actually make a plan to address these issues and the impacts of climate change, especially on these an urban sector, especially our cities. So I think this is the end of my slide. Again, I'd like to thank everyone. So we have a website, so you can get more information about what we are doing. Um, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivek. That's really deep work that has gone into the maps you show us, and since that's also my area of expertise, maybe just very quickly I'll jump in and say that there is a very robust methodology behind your work. I remember we discussed it back in Shillong, and I understand the IITs, Indian Institute of Technologies, are behind this work to help states conduct it. So. Models are carefully selected. The regional climate models have been used with a very high resolution. So this really allows decision makers to plan ahead and know with the best level of accuracy we can get today what kind of challenges they may face in the future. And of course, further downscaling it and really getting a granular overview will be extremely helpful for cities, because cities may have different microclimates from what the region has. So thank you very much, and I hope we come back to this topic when we have the interactive session. And now I am pleased to call to the floor Pema Tinley. So Pema, as I understand, you'll cover a little bit the other side of the climate story, which is climate change mitigation, and you'll share with us the experience of Bhutan on how Bhutan and mountain cities in Bhutan in particular face climate change mitigation, and how do they deal with that. Please take over.
Thank you, Olga. I think I will. Okay, thank you, brother. My topic, as our coordinator already mentioned, but I will be talking about a little bit about Bhutan as a how we are mitigating climate change impact on a national level, and how this national level policies have been translated into the grassroots level, which means in the city level. So I will present to you the case study of Bumtang district, which is in the eastern side of Bhutan. Next. So it is divided into three sections. So firstly, I will give you a brief thing about gross national happiness, because it's a national level policy that we follow in whatever field that we do, which means even in the policy, and I mean formulation of policy, even if it is about formulation of city plans, we base on gross national happiness index and the concepts. And secondly, I will present you about how this has been translated to the case of Bumtang, and the major challenges that we face while we implement the city plans, and after implementation, what are the risks that we still have because of this climate change impact. Next, brother. Okay, so the gross national happiness, as you all know, it is the vision of the enlightened and very visionary king of Bhutan, the fourth king of Bhutan, which was coined in the 1972, when he said that gross national happiness is more important than GDP. So it is basically the in Bhutan, it is the tool to measure the any development activities in Bhutan. Next. So it revolves around these four pillars. Firstly, the sustainable socio-economic development, preservation and promotion of culture, environmental conservation, and these three things has to be linked with the good governance. Otherwise, without good governance, these three key things cannot be implemented. So that's why good governance is considered very important when we talk about climate change, which is very global issue. Next, Pradeep. So the main reason, the very major reason that why we are carbon negative is because of these protected areas and biological corridor which was established in 1999. Uh, that's also by His Majesty the Fourth King. So as you see the this ash shaded ones are protected areas, and the green ones are the linked between these biological corridors, which means they are all connected. And the recent study shows that the tiger from Bengal, the Bengal tiger moves up and reaches till the coldest place up in the Kangar Peninsula, which shows that the ecosystem is very strong. And because of this, the Bhutan, we still have 72% of forest coverage, and the country, it is a mandate that country must maintain 60% of forest coverage. So this is one of the main reasons that we are still carbon negative, but still we face the challenges of the climate change impact in terms of flash floods and temperature variations and all. So the red mark that I've shown you is the district that I'm going to talk about, the Bumthang district, which lies here. And the district, as you see, the more than 50% is covered by the biological corridor, and we have just very little developable area. So next. And second thing is the renewable energy that we have. The country is completely powered by hydroelectricity, and we also see look into other alternative energy such as solar energy. Next, Pradeep. So so how we have translated this the national level concept of gross national happiness into case of Bumthang. So why I say this heart of Bhutan is this district Bumthang is the only district which still has the untouched traditional architecture, and also has the it's a religious, we can say religious district of the country. So it has an ideal case of climate change impact, and also to mitigate the climate change impact. Next, Pradeep. So firstly, the reason that the Bumthang is seen as a ideal case of climate, ideal case how Bhutan is dealing with the climate change impact is the culture that we have, culture and tradition that we have. So it is harmonious relationship between the culture and nature. So next, Pradeep. So we have this very unique cultural landscape in Bhutan. We still emphasize, we still mandate, we still uh, we still enforce people to follow this, and also enforcing the planning, I mean the urban planning, urban plans and city planning. So which is, we have in the top level is mountain, then comes forests, and mountain forests where the private construction activities is strictly prohibited, and religious structures where the only the private structures are prohibited. Some religious structure can be built here, and then comes settlement, where private structures are built, and then comes the farmlands. So farmlands where again the private constructions are strictly prohibited. So this cultural landscape that we follow is uh, basically friendly with nature, and it also preserves and conserves the nature and also the streams and rivers that flows through. This is why it is naturally in line, the system that we follow, the planning system that we follow, it is naturally in line with the nature that we have in a traditional settlement setting of Bhutan. Next, brother. So the second thing is the religious belief that we have. So it is the religious belief that the people fear to interfere or to harm or harm or to exploit the natural resources in Bhutan. So this is, I think, the cases of in. I also heard some cases, similar cases in Meghalaya and all. So people believe their deities live in every tree and water. That's why they do not intend to harm them. So that's how naturally they remain the natural resources in Bhutan. Forests in Bhutan remain unharmed by the human beings. So next, brother. So now, how we have implemented or how we have translated to the local area plan. So which is a human intervention, a new township of Puntang that we have, and we started implementing this urban plan in 2017, and it's 6 years since, and we are still implementing. So I will explain a little bit about this urban plan, how we are trying to introduce the climate change impact. Next, brother. So the thing that the Bumthang has followed is Bumthang has tried to learn from the traditional settlement, which is the clustered types of settlement pattern that we have in Bumthang, and also generally in traditional setting of settlement in Bhutan. So we try to follow this traditional. We learn from this traditional setting where the settlements are clustered, and the roads do not pass through settlement, and the parkings are placed outside the settlement, and houses and structures are connected by footpath. That's how we try to follow the traditional type of sit- type of form of urban planning, and also we try to maintain the pure traditional architecture of Bhutan. This is the typical the buildings that are shown in the pictures are typical types of building that we have in Bhutan, 2 story, but we also have 3 story traditional buildings and all. But in Bumthang, we try to maintain this pure traditional architecture, which is very nature friendly in terms of in terms of construction materials that we use. So we mandate or we enforce them to use people to use only local construction materials such as stone, timber, and the rammed earth form kinds of construction, which was which was which was very famous in the olden days, but now it is diminishing, and Bhutan are also facing this kinds of modernization, kinds of construction materials. We import lots of construction materials from India. I think this is the right time or the correct way to go back in time and follow the traditional way of construction. Next, brother. So the concept that we have implemented in Bumtang is safe. Firstly, safe. When I say safe, it means safe from the glacier lake outburst flood, and the sustainable. So when I say sustainable, we purely focus on the agriculture activities, and in terms of Bumtang, it is specifically about agriculture and tourism. And then second, we focus on culture and tradition, conservation and protection of culture and tradition, and then we focus on beautification of the district. So the if I tell you about the okay, and the we start by when we start the planning, we start by developing a hazard maps. So as you see in the map, the blue shaded ones depicts the glove area. So we try to prevent that, we try to preserve that, and we try to disallow the construction of houses, private structures there. And as you go higher up, we have steep slopes, and that there also we do not allow the construction activities. We try to preserve it as forest, natural environment. So we neither go higher up nor go lower near the river. So we have certain kind of buffer that I have maintained in the cities, so that the impact on the human lives remain very minimal. So next, brother. So the challenges and threats that we focus.
Pema, couple of minutes, please.
Yeah, okay,
Pause.
I think it's near the end. So a couple of challenges and threats that we face, brother. Please next. Yeah, the main challenge that we face is the glaciers. As you see, the shaded part in the in the top. I think it's lying, it's over hanging over like in the sky and about to come down. So the Bhutan is here. So I think, yeah, if this climate change impact happens, I think whole Bhutan will be flooded, and also the southern part of, I mean, the southern part of areas like that lies, yeah, like in Assam, Meghalaya, and all. I think this is the big challenge that we face. We always live in fear because of this. And next, Pradit. Recently, we also tried to do the artificial draining of lakes recently, and we also continue to do this. And even the local people come together to help in draining the lakes. This is the example of how we try to do manually. Next, Pradeep. So when it comes to Bumthang specifically, the red marked are the glove area where the constructions are not allowed and the only the agriculture things are allowed. So the thing that we face is that land scarcity, developable land scarcity, because when we restrict the construction here in the flood area and also in the mountainous area, I think we have left with very minimal developable land. That's how we still try to find solutions to relocate those people uh, who are in the flood area or who are in the very steep slopes. And also the food security, because all the agriculture lands are along the river. And I think we fear that because of the global glove will impact this agriculture area, which is the only source of income or only source of food that we have in Bhutan. So I think there's a huge risk in it. Next, Pradeep. So I think this challenge needs collective global action. I think Bhutan is very small, and with just about 800,000 people, and we have very small economy. I think also, even though we do lots of things to mitigate the climate change impact, I think Bhutan alone cannot do it. I think larger countries need to come. And this is just an example that we try to set every day. We try to advertise something like that, say advertise, or we try to voice out through our own local ways or local means. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pema. You've given a very interesting overview of how Bhutan deals with the climate issue beyond climate change mitigation, in fact. So it was quite interesting to see how planning is taking into consideration the different climate change trends that are happening. And in fact, while you were talking, there was quite a lively exchange on the chat on the case of Bhutan. So you can go through it and maybe you share your insights on that. It's a case that usually generates quite a lot of interest. So thanks a lot for bringing us there. And now we will, I believe, go back a little bit to India and Nepal with Joydeep, who will walk us through what kind of challenges. Joydeep, I know you've been working in the Himalayas for a very long time, and you have great exposure. So we really look forward to hearing from you on what kind of challenges specific to the cities of the region you have pointed out, and maybe what are the learnings that we should take from what is going on. The floor is yours. 10 minutes, please.
Thanks, Olga. Yeah, I was very glad to hear the previous speakers because they expressed principles that are excellent and should be followed, especially at a time when climate change is making it very clear that all areas of the Himalayas, eastern Himalayas, cities in the Himalayas are going to face worse and worse impacts all the time. So, given that, what are we doing? And what should we be doing? I think it is very important for us to tease out the major impacts that these areas and specifically these cities are facing so that we are in a position to actually tackle these impacts. Now, if you think about climate change impacts, Pema just talked in detail about the danger of gulf. We've all just been through a huge gulf on the Tista waters. and we know what it can do. And so, if you see, you will notice that in the mountains, almost every impact of climate change comes through water. It's the climate water nexus that we need to look at very, very carefully. And two things are happening simultaneously. I know Sanjeev will tell you later about springs drying up in the Himalayas. So we are simultaneously having a situation where we are facing water shortages due to climate change, and we are facing flash floods due to climate change, and also cloudbursts due to climate change. So it's the water balance that is completely going haywire as a result of climate change, and that is what is leading to all these problems. What can specifically our cities do? Olga asked me to concentrate on cities, so I look at the two largest cities in this area we are talking about. Guwahati and Kathmandu are the two largest cities in this area. And one of the things about Guwahati is that whenever it has been facing floods and flash floods, it has been worsening. And one of the major reasons for worsening is that the wetlands around Guwahati are being used as garbage dumps and landfills. So the water cannot drain away. So, how do you handle this? Urban planners who are speaking today, architects who are speaking today on this panel, they all know the solution. They are all trying very hard to implement the solution. But what we are finding is that the solutions will not get implemented unless there is public support for these solutions. They're simply not getting implemented. Pema just showed exactly how to build a city under the threat of glove. And I'm sure that given their way, urban planners in India, Nepal would do exactly the same, but they're not being given their way. The laws are being flouted, the policies are being flouted. So, how do you handle this? The only way to handle this really is for civil society to start moving. And so, I just wanted to show you some examples on how it can actually work. These are all published articles on the third pole. I don't have the time to go through them. I am just showing you the headings. And this is how to segregate garbage. It was done by an NGO, and it has actually improved garbage disposal and solid waste management in Guwahati very significantly. Pradut, can we see the next one, please? Now, you see the kind of urban flooding Guwahati experiences regularly. If you see the level of water logging on the streets, what do we need there? We need a flood warning system so that people can move to upper floors. Of course, we also ought to be moving to building houses on stilts in places like Guwahati. But we have a legacy of houses that are not built on stilts. And where will they go? They need an early flood warning system. And if these basic things can be taken care of, a lot of our climate resilience will improve. Let's go look at the next one. Now, Guwahati is on the list of smart cities. But it's a dream. And this dream will not be fulfilled. This will not become a reality unless Guwahati can save its wetlands. Let's see what's happening in Kathmandu. This is a photo feature that was shot during the lockdown, COVID-19 lockdown. It was found that one of the impacts of lower economic activity in the Kathmandu Valley was that springs actually started flowing better in the even including in Kathmandu city, and traditional water spouts, which are almost all spring fed. They were the ones who came to the rescue of residents during the lockdown. Let's see the next one. And this is the normal situation. Kathmandu residents wait for water that never arrives. It's a mountain city. It's a city through which a river passes. And still, it is a city where most residents are dependent on water tankers for their daily needs. So, what sort of urban planning are we talking about? And this is what we need to do. And this will not be done irrespective of all the good intentions of urban planners and architects, unless we can get municipal rules implemented, not to build on floodplains, not to obstruct water channels when you build, not to build on very steep slopes. We all know these rules. It's just a question of implementing them to improve our climate resilience, and that is what is required. And the only way to implement them now is for civil society to move. Let's see the last one. Plastic. We have all seen how difficult it is to get to even a global plastics treaty to even control plastics. If we look around us at any point in time, we'll see plastic waste. We can talk endlessly about plastic and then go and use plastic in just about everything. Again, no amount of laws, no amount of rules is going to really change the situation unless there is strong pressure from the citizens. Thank you very much.
Joydeep, thank you very much. I stopped my timer because I saw that you are handling the time so smoothly that I'm really not required. That's impressive. Thanks a lot for doing this. Thanks a lot also for sharing these key points. What I retain, which I think is very important, in which we've been discussing a lot in the international community, is that we do need governmental support, and to foster this support, we do need public demand. Now, the question is, how do we generate this public demand in a context where so many issues are there that people carry on with their busy lives? And unless the crisis hits you on the face, like on the slides you showed, we may not have enough of it to think long term and anticipate the changes, the challenges that Vivek was mentioning, for example. So maybe something to debate here. I understood that you have to leave for another meeting, so you may not be with us for the discussion session, but if you're comfortable with it, please drop your email address in case someone wants to ask
Sorry
questions.
about that. Yes, anybody who wants to get in touch with me, the organizers have my email. I'm a working journalist. I have an assignment to rush to. Sorry about that.
Thanks a lot for being with us. It was
Thank
great,
you.
and we look forward to your support on this topic.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. As we know between speakers, the next speaker was to be Aiban, but if both Aiban and Sanjeev don't mind, I feel that maybe Sanjeev should take over, because Sanjeev, you're going to focus on the water issue as well, and we'll have continuity with that point that Joydeep made, that the water nexus is a key element for mountain cities. And
Yeah,
Aiban,
sure. Yeah, thank you. I think I'm okay to come in now. Just
Great.
building on the story which has been shared by Joydeep and also the previous panelists, which talks about water supply in a more sustainable way being one of the key dimensions of any climate resilient cities, particularly in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region. Now, I will not talk about the kind of water resources that are there in the cities which people depend on. They can range from streams, to deep wells which are going deeper, of course. But an important and a kind of an invisible resource is springs. And springs basically are the part of the groundwater systems. So springs are, you know, when the groundwater emerges out on the surface, they form spring water, which is naturally, you can say, in a way, filtered and is relatively safe, depending, of course, on the hydrogeology of that place. And in fact, if you look at the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, or even globally, there is no spring census as such. Meaning, now just recently we have a global review coming of springs from the Spring Stewardship Institute in the US, which estimates that there are about 50 million springs globally. 50 million springs. But our estimates of in the Hindu Kush Himalaya region is that there are about 9 to 10 million springs. And these are the lifeline for both urban and the rural communities. And why I say urban? Because if you look at most of the water supplies that are coming to the cities like Kathmandu, which Joydeep was mentioning, uh, they are actually coming from springs or spring fed streams, which can be located within Kathmandu or on the periphery in the watersheds, like we have Godavari. If you see the next slide, please, I'll come back to this slide later on. We see that almost every day 2000 to 4000 meter cubic water is coming from a distant Godavari watershed to the Kathmandu valley through tankers. So it's such an important spring shed area in the Godavari, which supplies water to the city. And this is a scenario in many other cities in the Himalayas. I come from a city called as Nainital, which is in Uttarakhand state of India, where springs or spring-fed lake is the lifeline of most of the people. If you go to Masuri, they are all spring-fed systems. And springs are not only important for drinking water; they are important also for cultural reasons. And somebody mentioned in the previous, I think, Dr. Rajan, that cultural significance of springs has to be also taken into account, where many festivals are organized around springs in the Himalayan cities. Many springs are considered as sacred. Devi Sthan and all they are called as. You see, in India, Himalayas, people get married particularly in rural and even in some urban cities where they go to springs first for the blessings and then only go home. So these kind of practices are there. They become very important from springs point of view. And important is also that springs they sustain the biodiversity habitats, particularly the microhabitats. So there are multiple uses and bring co-benefits also in terms of biodiversity conservation. But the challenge is that springs are drying, depleting, either they have dried or their discharge has gone down rapidly. Now, if you look at Indian Himalayan region, there's a report from the Niti Aayog, which is the policy think tank, which says nearly 50% of the estimated 3 million springs in this region have either dried or their discharge has gone down, which means they have a huge implication on the water security of both rural and urban areas, given that there is a whole focus on every household should have a tap water. Now, if the tap water has to come, it has to come from multiple sources, and springs is one of the primary sources where many water supply schemes are attached. And if springs are drying, so are these, pipeline supply schemes. They are threatened, and therefore the achieving the sustainable development goals particularly the SDG 6, and also the other goals relating to gender equality become very difficult. So it's a very emerging, and there's increasing evidence that springs are trying across many countries. Now, Bhutan, we've just heard today, good, very good presentations. But the reality is, even in Bhutan, it's not just the glaciers, it's also the springs, which are so important as water supply systems for the people living there and also ecosystems. And there too, there is increasing evidence that springs are drying up. Likewise, in Nepal, we've just been completed a study in one of the 7 wards here in municipalities, mapped around 500 springs, and almost 20% of them have dried. So it's a very, very serious concern. Now, the question comes, what can be done? And the conventional approach of reviving springs has been of a like a typical watershed management. You have a spring, you do something around that spring, regreen it or fence it or do some management measures with the expectation that springs will be conserved and the recharge area will be maintained. Yes, that is important. Areas around the springs should be managed well. But the whole science of springs is different compared to the watershed management. And because springs are part of the groundwater system, if you can go back to the earlier slide, please, it really becomes very important that we are talking about the aquifers, the hydrogeology. Our approach to springshed management, we've taken a 6-step protocol which includes hydrogeological assessment for reviving springs. And that is important because it's not about a ridge to valley approach of watershed management, which is effective when it comes to springs. Because the recharge area of a spring or a cluster of springs could actually lie in another watershed due to the inclinations of the rocks and the aquifer systems. So it becomes extremely important that we understand the hydrogeology of the place and then only co-design measures which are beneficial for the local communities but also for biodiversity and climate actions. And this is possible. It's possible through hydrogeological assessment, also engaging the local communities. So what we are doing as a 6-step protocol, within that we are training local resource persons and calling them para hydrogeologists who are trained on the basics of hydrogeological assessment, the tip, the strike, and the types of rocks, etc., and then map it and see where the recharge areas lie. And our studies across Nepal, even in Bhutan, there's a very good example in Loling, Paro district, where spring has been revived due to such approaches. And as a result, the government of Bhutan, particularly now the Department of Water, is scaling up springshed management across the country through inventorization and piloting, and also embedding within their 13th five-year plans. Likewise, in India, Indian Himalayan region Niti Aayog has a strategy to roll out springshed management across all the states. But the question here is the capacity, meaning how the capacities to apply the springshed management approach, which integrates hydrogeology, but also a very strong focus on gender and social inclusion and participatory approaches becomes very important. So going forward, I think ICIMOD, we are an intergovernmental organization working in 8 countries across the Hindu Kush Himalaya. We are contributing to scaling springshed management also now as a nature-based solution across all the 8 countries by working with the governments and civil society organizations. Also, the academia can have a key role to play here in capacity building and also generating evidence from the pilots, because policymakers are looking for facts and figures. And so we are having good monitoring systems to show that spring shed management with this hydrogeological science element works. Now, urban areas, we can see, of course, in Kathmandu and other, the basic reason why springs are drying up is not just the climate factor, which of course is there due to variability of rainfall or snowfall decreasing, but it's more about the way infrastructure development is happening, meaning the areas which were recharge area are being concretized, so there is hardly any infiltration happening, which would contribute to the aquifers and therefore sustain the springs. That is a major issue. The other issue is around water quality itself. Springs is not about water discharge, it's also about water quality. And we see the waste management or even increasing use of chemicals in the recharge areas. That is also causing a lot of problem in the water quality and therefore the quality of health of people and the livestock. So what is required here if we have to think of climate resilient cities in the mountains is to think about this invisible resource which lies in the form of groundwater management, and that becomes so important. Unfortunately, most of the focus is on surface water or of extraction of the groundwater. There is hardly any focus on the recharge, the replenishment of the groundwater to maintain that water balance. And therefore, my key message here is when it comes to climate resilient water management, it is important now to move from a source to a resource management approach. And there springs, when we say springs, it's about spring sheds, which includes the aquifer systems and how we recharge them. And of course, combining with the demand management also and bringing the water use efficient practices. And there are very good examples of springs having been revived across many countries, including Nepal, India, Bhutan. And I think we need to learn on these practices. And there has to be a greater policy traction in the integrated water resource management or any other city planning. The springs and the source to resource management approach needs to be considered and integrated within the plans, and therefore also the budgets which are allocated for water resource management and water security. I'll stop here. I think I'm happy to take questions later on concerning this the spring topic. Thank you.
Sanjeev, thank you very much. You've really helped us go deep into this topic, which many of us may not be familiar to a huge extent, and really shared the research and all the work, the very dedicated technical work that went behind these conclusions. That's really helpful. And I hope we discuss it further when we start the interactive session. And now let us go to our last, but of course not the least, presentation of Mr. Ayban S. Mafkaro. And Ayban, I believe you will share with us your perspective of an architect, help us look a little bit on how traditional building systems face climate and seismic activity, what we can learn from it, and then what kind of challenges today an architect would face in relation to urban design bylaws, and how do we navigate new constructions essentially in this complex environment. Please take over.
Yeah, thanks, Olga. In fact, when I saw the topic on when you call it mountain cities, I think so. The first thing that comes to my mind is that we shouldn't be calling our settlements cities anymore, because in fact, mountain towns have a carrying capacity of their own. Cities, when you use the word cities, then you start thinking of the metros, and straight off a different perspective comes to mind. But to me, growing up in Shillong, when I saw Shillong being a small town, coming from starting from a small town and becoming, as you can see from the picture, a big, I mean, a city, which is, I always tell my friends, the city is still in diapers. You know, it's we, and what I'm going to talk here now is basically the what is unique about Shillong in some ways, and the challenges that it has. Next slide, please. Next slide. I mean, yeah. So just a brief historical background. It was Shillong arrived when the British came over from Cherrapunji to and decided to look for a new place to start. Cherrapunji being too rainfall, heavy rain, experienced too much of heavy rainfall. So the British came over to Shillong way back in 1864 and established Shillong as a cantonment initially. And 10 years later, they brought the headquarters, they became the headquarters of the erstwhile Assam, which is at that time the capital of Assam, being the state comprising of Nagaland, of Mizoram, Meghalaya, parts of Arunachal Pradesh. So Shillong, from a small town, jumped into being a capital where they could take the load as to take the load of the infrastructure load. I mean, that's what we want to talk now. Then the British, as they did, plonked themselves right in the middle of town and surrounding themselves by all the small villages around. And they used the army as buffer zones. This is in planning context. Maybe Pema could understand this better. And the Shillong Municipal Board was established in 1878 by the British. And may I note here that Shillong is one of the only cities in the Northeast which has a municipal board, which has a system in place, a building bylaw in place right from 1878. And that gives us an advantage in many ways, and one over capital, let me put it this way, capital town cities, capital mountain cities, which is like Gangtok or Aizawl or Kohima, which are capital cities, capital cities in the mountain areas. We are better off than them. I was just discussing about with my friends who in Gangtok from the disaster that happened, and they were telling me that you guys are so lucky that you have a municipal board where and which is very followed strictly, as per norms. When it comes to climate change and climate mitigation and vulnerability, as Mr. Vivek had talked about, there are two things that Shillong as a city should be aware of. One is floods with the incessant rain, and Shillong in the later slide, you'll come to know that Shillong is basically sits on a basin, on a watershed, where the river Wamkra passes through at the center. And this is the most vulnerable part of town is actually the banks of the Wamkra River, where there's a lot of urban development happening right close to the bank. In fact, there are some places in Shillong where the river Wamkra has become narrow or made narrow because of urban development. And this is what we should learn from our ancestors when in the villages or even in Shillong prior to this, when there was a marked a, a community valued consciousness that there should always be a gap between a river and the road. And that's always called re-ride, which means that it's community land. It's a place, it's a space for people to have a bath or to wash their clothes, but not to build buildings right in front of it. But this is where we gone wrong, in our thirst for development, and that's where we start bringing our buildings right up close to the river. Just for you to have an idea of what I'm talking about in terms of the map of Shillong. Next slide, please. Yeah, sorry, it's not so clear. The reds are basically the small villages. The cantonment is right at the center. That's where the British plonked themselves. And we still have doing and we are and one thing which is unique about Shillong is actually it's an irony here, is actually the presence of the cantonment. Because the cantonment became the green lung of Shillong. is that if you look at the map of Shillong, the only green area at the center of Shillong is actually the cantonment because of its low-rise buildings, the trees, very less development. They have their own cantonment board where we are allowed only G+1 in terms of construction, whereas the rest of Shillong is like haphazard. I mean, even though we have a municipal board, but it allows us to only G+3, which is 4 stories. Then the other thing about the other green the other uniqueness of Shillong is also the forests, the reserve forests that we have towards the north, and also towards the northeast, which we have the forest belonging to the Hima of Milliam, which is the chieftain of Shillong. For our viewers, Meghalaya is under the 6th schedule. There are certain traditional laws which are still being governed here, and which is I would and another uniqueness is our land ownership system, which is where land is privately owned. It is a double-edged sword for some, where it could restrict development activities, but in some way it sort of like protects us from any excess development. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's just a graphic about the Shillong Municipal Board when it was made and all that. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is very interesting. As I've said before, being under the 6th schedule, Shillong urban conglomerate could be divided into two. There are two main players that operate the building bylaws. One are the Shnongs, the Dorba Shnongs, which are the small communities outside the urban areas. Okay, and these are operated by the district council, which just last year they had to follow the Shillong Municipal Board bylaws. They have their own problems. They're teething problems right now because it's something new to them. Then in the other European wards, these are governed by the Shillong Municipal Board, which is headed by the Meghalaya Urban Development Authority. So basically, in the entire city of Shillong, there are two agencies. One is the district councils, which looks after the Dorba Shillong, the small communities around Shillong. And then you have the Shillong Municipal Board, which looks after the European wards, and also some of the Dorba Shillong areas, which happens to be under the municipal board right from 1878. Next slide, please. Yeah, as I mentioned, the uniqueness as a mountain city is the only city in the Northeast with a robust bylaw in place since 1878. It has an efficient public services delivery system whereby it uses the strong community ties and institution of the Dorbar Shnongs. The Dorbar Shnongs are, for people from the mainland India, are almost like panchayats. They are like village communities. So these have very strong community ties. They have a strong, I mean, it is the lowest form of in terms of administration. They're very strong in terms of looking after the public infrastructure, public delivery system. You have then the other third, we'll talk about that later. The third is that actually Shillong, Meghalaya, if you look at the map, I remember the map that the first slide that Vivek had showed. If you look at the map, Meghalaya is actually not really part of the Himalayas per se, but as I used to explain to my friends, it's like it has the rug effect. When you push a rug, then in pops in the Khasi and Jaintia hills, and towards the north you have the Brahmaputra Valley and the Himalayas. So actually part of the Deccan Plateau. We are in terms of our geological format. We are very resilient. We are part of the old mountains. We are not so much prone to landslides or glacial meltdowns as my friend Pema in Bhutan. We have a strong soil bearing capacity for construction. And the fourth is that after the great Assam earthquake that happened in 1896, sorry, I think it was 1876, it has led to a new building construction known as the Assam type houses, which are basically wooden frame houses with acra infill in between. They're very lightweight. They were introduced by a Japanese seismologist after the earthquake when he happened to be passing through. And so at that time when Shillong was the capital of Assam, so it was mandatory by the government that all government institutions were made from were using Assam type houses. So that's a very good start, in fact, for building bylaws at that time. As I mentioned earlier, the presence of the cantonment with its forest cover in the middle of the city, the Shillong Golf Course, which I guess in 1874, when Shillong became the capital of Assam, the golf course was in the outskirts of town. But right now, town has grown around the golf course. You know, and then the other interesting thing is the presence of cemeteries. The presence of cemeteries, which are green lungs in the middle of the city. Shillong being a Christian, where the Christianity is a dominant faith. So a lot of these Dorbar Shnongs have their own little cemeteries around them. And to me, as an architect, I looked at them as green lungs. You know, I mean, they'll be there forever. I mean, there's not going to be any construction there anymore. So that's something unique which I want to talk about. And the other thing, the other unique urban feature are the junctions or lads or little crossroads in every locality, which create nice community gathering spaces. Next slide, which shows some photographs about what I'm talking about. Yeah, these are the top photographs is the community cleaning programs, which is organized with the Dorbar Shnongs, where once a year, just before Christmas in the month of November, after the rains, there's one day which is dedicated to a community cleaning program where everyone from every each member of any household comes out and cleans the neighborhood, the cemeteries, as I talked about. Next slide. The Shillong Golf Course in the middle of town. As you can see in the other slide, those two green darkened areas are the reserve forest, which is in the middle of town, and the golf course there on the right, which is yeah, a little bit scarred. Next, those are the lards, the junctions in most localities, which acts as places of gathering places. Next. Okay, let's move to the challenges. Having a multi-layered administrative system tends to overlap urban development activities and also common responsibilities. This will talk about when I had mentioned about the river Waamkra passing through the middle of town. So all all the sewage goes towards the Waamkra, because I guess at that time when the British were around, population was very less. But with added population, I mean more garbage, more liquid waste. So the Wamkra has now become a sewer in a sense. And there are, we'll talk about later. There are I mean organizations and even the government is working on that. You know, I'm also part of a draft. A policy to draft guidelines for the protection of the Wamkra. Then we have the unique land ownership system where the land belongs to privately owned. This tends to hinder a lot of urban development infrastructure, like widening of roads. All mountain towns have very narrow roads. And in this case, because of the land, of a unique land ownership system, I mean, you can't widen roads anymore. We have problems with sewage services again. Lack of an efficient mass public transport system due to narrow roads, high traffic density in town, and the lack of the political will to transfer or separate government departments to New Shillong Township. In fact, right now, transport, transport or rather traffic is the biggest problem in Shillong right now. In fact, I mean, people are talking about flyovers and one-way streets, but to me personally, as an architect, I think the only solution is an efficient mass public transport system. I mean, next, the other one is the lack of proper liquid waste, as I talked about. No, sorry, back to the last. I'm sorry. Then the other problem is when we're talking about the operations of the bylaws, is the lack of skilled manpower by the Dorbașnongs or the district councils to monitor and operate these new building bylaws. These building bylaws have been handed over to the district councils just a year back. And me as an architect, we have a big problem regarding our building permissions because it takes very long. The district councils are not, they don't have the wherewithal in terms of architects and planners to study our drawings. So I guess these are teething problems, but I'm sure that in the years to come things will work out. And the other, the last urban challenge that we have is an efficient heritage building authority. If you may recall what I've just said, that Shillong has been there since 1874. It has a lot of old buildings around, and both privately owned. Some are owned by the missionaries. Uh, some some are owned by the missionaries, some by the government, and so we really do need a strong heritage building authority to preserve and maintain these buildings. Next, yeah, the a typical photograph of the traffic congestion in Shillong during rush hour. That is the Wamkra. I mean, my mom used to swim on this river at one time, but look at the condition of it right now. It's becoming a sewage drain. Next,
And Iban, just 10, 20 seconds, please, because we
yeah,
just have very
yeah.
little
So yeah,
discussion.
okay. So the new urban remedies that the government has taken over, has thought of taking over, I mean, looking at is uh, a solid and liquid waste management for the purpose of rejuvenation and restoration of Wamkra and Umshurti, which is, I mean, it was, I think, formulated a year back. I mean, that's good for the town. The formation of the Meghalaya Water Bodies Conservation and Protection Guidelines, which I'm part of, and the introduction of government-aided school buses to mitigate traffic congestion within the city. So these are things which we could look forward for maybe a new image of Shillong in the next few years. Because of lack of time, actually, the next few slides would be about traditional remedies, traditional build forms, and the response to physical systems. But I'll leave it at this for now, and let us take questions and answers for after this. Olga?
Great. Yes, thank you very much for this. It was a very good ending of our panel with really delving deep into one specific city. And in fact, one of the key ideas I retained from your presentation is that the cities of the region are even more complex governance-wise, structure-wise, than other cities in the region, which are already quite complex. So there is a lot we need to take into consideration, and of course that creates its own challenges, which then we of course need people like you to learn from, because you've been navigating them for years. So I assume you now know, like what is the kind of the best way of getting about them. So I suggest that for the last maybe 15 minutes we have before Sabia makes conclusions of the session, we interact in the following couple of ways. So first of all, maybe Pradyut, if you could have all the speakers on the screen so that we can see each other. And I want to say it's been great. I really thank the panelists for bringing so much value, so much food for thought to us. And also I saw that participants were quite active and exchanging views on what we are learning in the process. So that's equally very valuable. So what I suggest now is that we take these 15 minutes and we exchange in the following three ways. So one, I think Pradyut can bring to us in a minute a few questions, which are simple questions, which will allow us to kind of understand better where we stand in this topic of rapid urban growth of mountain cities facing climate change. And I would request that please reply to them in the chat, because we'll also keep this information, and we already have the list of all the participants. So we may also circulate key ideas to you. We may share with you the learnings that we'll have at the Asian Pacific Urban Forum. So this is something we are trying out and putting up in place. But the idea is to really interact further and see how we can collectively support the sustainable urban development and local identity-based urban development in mountain cities. So please help us with replying and sharing your views to them. In addition to this, there is also an opportunity to join us here on the panel And I believe two participants have already voiced out this interest. If you would also like to join us, I think Asian Confluence can facilitate this, and then you can make your comment or ask your question here with us on the screen. And then finally, if you have questions to the panelists, this is also the opportunity to bring them up either in the chat, in the comment section, or if you want to join and ask them directly, this is also possible. So maybe what we can do, Pradyut, is to have the two persons who wanted to join us in person, and maybe they can say a few words, share their views, and meanwhile we can collect questions for the panelists, and then we can show the questions that we have prepared, on which we would really appreciate to have everyone's views. So, Pradyut, while you're facilitating the joining of the two persons who wanted to do that, I will ask to the panelists if you have any quick comments or questions to each other, anything that you would like to react to in the talks that have taken place today.
Miss Olga, I think we have one person who is interested, Mr. Prasann Kumar.
Okay.
He's on the screen.
Yes, I can see that. So should we in this case give him the word while we collect the questions?
Yeah, maybe.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead. We can see you. Just
Hello.
unmute yourself.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank all the panelists and the moderator for such a wonderful discussion. My question is, what are the economic implications of investing in climate resilience in these cities, mountain cities, and how financing and funding mechanisms be improved to support such initiatives? Because ultimately someone needs to finance those initiatives for them to be actively implemented. It's an open question. So that's it from my side.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to share the views on this on the panel? Maybe Iban or Sandeep, or maybe
Yeah,
Liban.
I think that's a very important question. If I can just come in with my thoughts on that. Well, we're talking of more resilient practices when it comes to cities and infrastructure development. And of course, it also means integrating more the nature-based solutions, which could be nature inspired, nature positive, or just nature based. And there are many which are there which can be put into practice and included in the planning and implementation processes. The question always becomes, what is the economic implications? Yes, a lot of the green kind of practices do take their time before they start giving the real benefits. But if you look at the implications of malpractices, if you concretize some recharge area of a spring, it has huge implications for the wider landscape, for the wider society, upstream, downstream. So economic, the losses and damages are far more than what you would actually have if you are investing in more nature based solutions, which are many, I would say, there. So, and the question is financing mechanisms. Yes, I think there is an increasing traction towards nature-based solution, I can say globally. So we need to harness those opportunities also from a climate adaptation perspective. I think the private sector can be coming in, with their social responsibilities, which can be supporting. But more important is to co-design good incentive mechanisms for the local communities to be part of the whole process. Because if I look at the spring example, is the local communities who manage the spring sheds. And why should they manage spring sheds if the water is going to another community? What are the incentives which they would get to be part of a process if they are just managing the recharge area and the actual water supply is going to another community? So those incentive mechanisms, whether you call them payment for environmental services, etc., need to be also looked at and put into place into policies and programs. So there are many examples, and I think individuals can also play an important role in being more sensitive to the cause of nature and the nature-based solution, and putting in their resources also to manage their areas with a win-win situation for everyone. Yeah, these are some of my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Sandeep. Maybe just quickly to add from my side, because that's one of the areas of my work, climate finance and cities' access to sustainable finance. So essentially, we are often in this chicken and egg game where international financial institutions, which do have not a huge but a fair budget for climate-related actions, sustainability actions, they would say that they're not seeing sufficiently well-built projects and well-managed projects, whereas the beneficiaries will say that there is not enough funding, and then we are looking at how we bridge this gap efficiently. Of course, understanding that the needs are much bigger than the funding the international development community has, but it is a good start, and it's really important and beneficial to look at the different schemes which are available. And usually for any kind of public benefiting project, we can find potential sources of funding. Of course, it's not always easy to access them, but there is a process which can bear fruits. When we look at it at a bigger scale and we really think of an impact at scale, there, of course, we need to bring in private finance, and there it becomes a little challenging because private finance needs return on investment, and not all these projects can show it in the short run or short to medium run. So, of course, issues are there, but some solutions are there as well. You will notice that we've now shared the questions from our side, and if you can please share your views while we are talking, that again, that will really help us to build meaningful exchange and discussion around the topic that we started today. And now I will look in the chat and see what kind of questions we have received. In fact, they seem to be quite a lot. So let me find the beginning of them. So I can see a question from Kenneth Paya. Is effective town planning in the hills more difficult and costly compared to cities in the plains? Maybe Iban and Pema, maybe you could share an insight on this.
Pema, maybe you can say something, since your place is a mixture of the hills and the plains.
Yes, thank you. I think comparatively, what we find here is really, while we implement the urban plans in mountain areas, I think really expensive comparatively to the plain areas. Because as you know, the plain areas, as you know, in mountain areas, we have to, even to construct a simple road, we need to go through the hilly areas, through the slopes and lots of cuttings and fillings, and then we have to build lots of retaining walls and all. So these structures, these ancillary structures, cost us a lot, comparatively more comparatively than the plain areas, where you just build a straight road. In hilly areas, we have to navigate here and there, and it takes a long time, even if it's a 1 kilometer route. So I think it's really expensive comparatively. Thank you.
Maybe one thing to add to this is that precisely because it may involve a higher cost, we also need to put much more thinking into what we build, because we don't want to rebuild it constantly. So in fact, at UNICITI a couple of years ago, we did a study on what is the life expectancy of buildings, and some primary research showed us that it halved compared to, say, 30 years ago, because buildings are not built to stay there long term anymore. And so when we look at this cost, maybe we should wonder whether we should change this perspective as well. There is another question from Vijay Rana, which I would like to take. So Vijay is pointing out that we do need to develop, and Vijay, maybe you mean also that density of cities is increasing, and so at the same time we have environmental concerns. So how do we find an ideal balance between development and environmental objectives? Who would like to maybe take this question forward in the panel?
I think that's an important question, and most of the political leaders also say that, quick fix versus the long term, benefits that come from certain development. But I take the example of roads. Now, road construction of the road, the way it is happening, the way bulldozers cut across the landscapes and aquifers, is one of the major causes of many springs drying up in the mountains. Can we not simply have a more, let's say a more greener road concept, which also within the road planning process identifies where are the recharge areas of critical springs which may be there, either along the road or, near the road in the settlements, and, put it into the road planning process and try to minimize the impact of any infrastructure development, the way it happens. And so I think at the time has come where we should be rather now shifting more towards the greener, the nature-based solution approaches, which can be a hybrid of gray and the green, but at the moment is so much, gray infrastructure development process that is happening. And I think that requires collective thinking. It requires global, local practices to be identified, documented, piloted with good evidence. I think there is enough knowledge around in this world, but somehow it's not shared enough. It is not documented enough. I think, and that's what Joydeep was indicating. Those stories, which can be so inspiring for anyone to actually integrate into their planning processes. Yeah, that's what I feel. There is time now. We start investing into more nature-based solution approaches, looking also at societal challenges, of course, and not just from biodiversity conservation point.
Thank you, Sandeep. Yes, Ivan.
Yeah, coming to Mr. Rana's question, development is a necessity. How do you balance environment and development? I think so. I mean, coming from Meghalaya, and I remember Pema talking about the sacredness of nature in their value system. We also have our sacred groves in Meghalaya, and I've noticed that all the sacred groves are around villages where they create a and when I meant by sacred groves and the ramifications is that you're not allowed to cut trees from inside the grove. The grove is to be left as they are. The biggest one is just close by to Shillong. So here we are, whenever there's development, we also have to balance it by having by looking back at our ancient values and having these structures or if you may use the sacred groves as urban features around development. So that creates a balance. I mean, a literal balance between development and the environment. And I wish in this beautiful township that Pema is doing in Bongthang. I mean, could you just imagine a sacred grove around the village, around the township? I mean, we have two types of sacred groves here. One is the sacred grove as in sacred, and we also have protected forests. Recently, there's a forest just behind my house, which belongs to the Hima Milim, that means the chieftain around. And there were talks of trying to they had leased to the forest department for social forestry. And after the lease got over, they were trying to reclaim. I mean, they got it back, and they were thinking of reclaiming it. I mean, using it for their own private use. You know, and the district council came into the scene and decided to call it a protected forest. So that ends the entire talk about trying to cut down the trees or destroying the forest. So maybe we could learn from our ancestors, look back at our value systems, and try to use them as to mitigate all these problems to create that balance between development and the environment.
Thank you. That's very helpful insight. Sabia, do we have time to take one more question maybe before you conclude? Okay, I'll just bring one last question. Unfortunately, we can't cover all of them. I see there quite a lot. What I suggest, so I'll take the question of Atrip Deka now, and for the other participants, please indicate who your question is directed to, and then if you do that, then we can follow up and put the replies maybe on our social media pages, or we'll work out how we can bring it to you. But now the last question I'd like to take is, for a citizen who is concerned and wants to play a role, what can the citizen do at an individual level to help build better infrastructure, better cities in mountain areas? Whoever wants to share an insight on this. Sandeep, you're smiling.
I can just come in with my own actions. I think that's a very important point to reflect on. Now, I have a house, where we have a garden and we have tiles. Now, the choice of the tiles depends on me. I could either have tiles which are very fancy, which allow every drop of rain to run off into the drain, or I could have tiles which are not so good looking, but they enhance the recharge. They allow some water to go into the aquifers. Now, I really see in the colony where I stay, most of the people like to have fancy tiles rather than the simple tiles which can, you know, which can manage the water and also recharge the groundwater. I think that's a simple way I could change my kind of mindset towards the kind of solutions I would go for. The other is the rainwater harvesting. I think we can do that, and we can have small infiltration pits which would allow water to also go into the ground and replenish. I could I could manage the water well, less demand, use the water efficiently. I would not throw away the waste wherever you saw the lake where your mother used to go. I'm one of our panelists from Meghalaya is saying so. Why? It's all about my actions. And secondly, can we raise our voice? I think that's more important at the platforms there where we argue and we ask our decision makers to actually go greener and a more sustainable pathway than the quick fix. I think these are some of my thoughts. But every human being, every family, individual can reflect on the way they can actually do the little bit, I feel.
Yes, what I hear is that it's a matter of where we put our attention.
Yeah,
If attention is there, we can look for solutions, we can inquire, and we can make choices. So wherever there is a span of choice that we can decide upon, we can act on that. And it can be small impact, big impact, but it is in the direction in which we want to go. So at this point, I'd like to thank tremendously all the panelists. Thank you so much. I really learned a lot. I was taking notes, and I really look forward to systemizing it, looking what we can bring to the Asia Pacific Urban Forum, seeing I'm later going to the COP28 in Dubai, so I want to also see what kind of specific challenges to mountain cities we can maybe bring to this international climate change debate. Thank you so much. It was really valuable. We hope to stay in touch with you. And thank you so much for the participants for being engaged and supportive and sharing your views as well. And Sabia, over to you to conclude the webinar. And you are muted.
Hello, and thank you, Olga, for a very wonderfully moderated panel. Thanks. Excellent presentations from all the panelists. And I think we had a very rich set of inputs from all the participants. I want to end, before I thank everybody, I want to end with one comment. I think, and a case, in Shillong, where we are headquartered, there is a colony called the RR colony, and Kenneth Pala brought this case up, where and Iban talked about Assam type houses. Now, Assam type houses, which are a very sustainable architectural style, are very fast leaving the landscape of Shillong. But RR colony has managed to keep it. Uh, Primarily maybe because they are not investing much. The families there are not very well off, and they're not investing in building big buildings, RCC buildings. But that colony has actually uh, followed some very important best practices, and it's interesting case study. I think Iban, you can look it up further. It's an interesting case study of what to do and where to put money and where not to put money. um, um, I think I took away several points. One was that water management, both groundwater, surface water, wastewater, uh, and related to that, I think urban landscaping, expertise in bringing in urban landscaping in the mountain cities would be a great area to delve deeper into, embracing traditions and more dialogues between urban planners, environmental engineers, civil engineers, and civil society, and in making policies for urban development in the mountain cities. We need more interaction, I think, between various silos, which are in the policy making right now, and involving civil society and involving the communities, and making the development more inclusive. And of course, waste management would be a very, very important aspect, and also embracing the local and historical traditions, contemporary traditions, the best practices, and learning from best practices from around the world, where technology has also brought in several. There are new building materials, sustainable building materials available. I was in Raleigh in the north, in the United States, a few days back, and they've introduced some very interesting uh, building materials in urban landscaping. So these are best practices which could be brought in. Um, uh, I think this dialogue between initiated by Asian Confluence and Unicity. Asian Confluence works as a development think tank specifically for the Eastern South Asian region. Our focus is on the Eastern South Asian region. We are headquartered in Shillong in the northeast of India, and Unicity, which is a think tank purely looking on urban development, is, I think, a very interesting combination, and we look forward to working together further and building a community together with all of you and the participants on how we can address this problem, because um, I think this is a crying need of the day, where we see development money is being spent, budgets are being allocated, but as money is being spent, we don't know whether the we are doing some damage also to our cities and our communities, or are we really developing or moving in the right step. So this needs a lot of thought and planning, and the pressures to somebody put up a question: how do you balance development and conservation? I don't think they're at conflict. It needs careful planning, and I think we need to take the time and need to take the effort and involve policymakers and put pressure on policymakers to take the time off to plan properly before projects are implemented. Because once money is spent, infrastructure is built, as somebody pointed out, we are covering our, we are locking up infiltration into water infiltration into the ground. Importance of groundwater, I see is it's extremely important, and I think this is something we will also take up in our future forums such as Nadi and other conferences of Asian Confluence, and we also request participants and the esteemed panelists to maybe contribute with some commentaries and write-ups and articles which we can in our respective platforms collaborate to produce some literature on this, because I don't see too much literature on urban planning and urban development in this whole discourse of development in Eastern South Asia, frankly speaking. So this would be a very important contribution, I think, to the whole discourse of the larger discourse of development. On that note, thank you again very much. Your time is very precious, but we've but you've taken it, and I think we are all benefited. So thank you very much, and we look forward to being in touch with each other. I think this is the start of a process rather than than one off. And next week, or actually 10 days from now, we will be at the Asia Pacific Urban Forum, and we will take this voice forward. But that is again one more step in that direction. But we want to bring it back to discussions in the communities, with the local governments, with the municipalities, with the Darbar Shnongs, on how these things can move forward. And this is going to be teamwork. This is going to be, collaborations. And that's the key, collaborations, I think, to forge better understanding, better planning, and better participation for a greener, more climate resilient urban infrastructure of the future. So on that note, big thank you to all of you, and a big thank you to all the participants who've joined us from everywhere. I see people from UK, Philippines, all over the Northeast, and Bhutan, and so many places all over the world. So thank you, and thanks to Olga for fantastic moderation, and thanks to my team at Asian Confluence, Pradyut, and all the entire team, Samhita, Prasanna, for being there, and particularly a big shout out to Pradyut for his fantastic, uh, you know, uh, technical support and planning of this entire program. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.